Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. I'm sure you're familiar by now with the concept of a movie so bad that it's good. A movie so horribly, incompetently made, or just so clumsy, or such a colossal failure on every level that it is unintentionally, ironically, funny and entertaining. A great and iconic example of this, for those of you maybe not familiar with this concept, is Tommy Wiseau's The Room, a passion project of Mr. Wiseau, something he wrote, directed, produced, and funded himself. He was also the lead actor, and also there were funding issues, and also the script was being rewritten constantly. Also, Wiseau's just not very talented. He's not a great writer. He's not a great director. He's not a great actor, and it shows consistently in almost every single scene of The Room. And yet, it's still extremely entertaining. It has an earnesty and an honesty and a real emotion to it that shines through even in its worst moments, which are now emboldened by the over-the-top acting, by the ridiculous writing, by weird transitions and weirdly overdramatic love scenes with sappy-ass fucking pop-rock ballads and songs thrown into the mix. But what about an album so bad that it's good? An album so incompetently put together that it too is funny and entertaining. That is what we're talking about here today. Albums that are so poorly made, but despite that, they're genuinely really funny and really entertaining in an ironic and totally unintentional way. And I would like to stress before we go any further, even though this channel is called The Metal Meltdown, and even though we will try to talk primarily about metal albums that fit this category, I'm just going to talk about albums in general that I feel are so bad that they're good. And I think maybe one of the best examples ever, a truly iconic example, right off the bat, is Angelic to the Core from Corey Feldman. If The Room were an album, it would be this. It is made with an incredibly sincere amount of honesty and passion, but simultaneous to that, it is being put together by a man who has no idea what they're doing, but is convinced that they know exactly what they're doing. You've got the song Go For It, which is an over-the-top, overproduced mishmash of 2010s generic radio pop and EDM with an incredibly phoned-in feature from Snoop Dogg. Then there's Love and Lies, which has multiple vocal layers of Corey Feldman mostly just grunting and growling on top of the most boring, basic beats imaginable. Also, nothing is timed or lined up correctly. It always feels like Corey Feldman is either falling behind or way too ahead of himself. Like, it's just offbeat consistently. Then there's Forbidden Attraction, a totally cringeworthy attempt at like an edgy, sexy, kind of like mid-90s, early 2000s Michael Jackson style rager. Like something he would have had on History or Invincible, but like way more fucking incompetent. Then there's We Wanna Change, a really goofy, cheesy, kind of like piano-driven, kind of loungy song. Like, it feels like something I would hear in like a really bad kind of Disney knockoff animated movie, or something I'd hear in like a fucking shit commercial. There's also, for some reason, a cover of Working Class Hero, a fucking protest song, thrown into the mix, and I'm certain if John Lennon were still alive and heard this, he would ask to be shot again. There's also, for some reason, skits across the album that, like, do riffs on, like, classic scenes and themes from, like, Charlie's Angels and, like, the Adam West Batman TV show. And the whole thing is maybe 90 minutes fucking long and just an absolute travesty in the funniest, most exciting and entertaining way possible. If you've spent any time on the internet in the past decade, there's a chance you might already be familiar with this record. It's kind of a massive meme, but if you're not, I'm happy I could finally turn you on to it. Fucking grab a 6-pack of beer and a bucket of popcorn and jam this record and get ready for like the biggest, heartiest fucking fits of laughter you've had in years. Another icon of the so bad it's good category would probably be Philosophy of the World, the first and only album ever released by 1960s pop rock outfit The Shags. Quite possibly the most utterly incompetent record ever put together in almost every way. Like, the guitars aren't tuned, everything is offbeat, the mixing and mastering, the production makes everything sound really thin and grainy, nothing has any body or life or color to it, objectively bad vocal performances across the board. If you told me that every single person who worked on this record was incredibly, stupidly, dangerously drunk and or high, I would fucking believe you. Now, granted, I concede that being very drunk and or high was pretty normal for a pop rock musician in the late 60s going into the 70s. I mean, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, the list goes on and on. It was a pretty normal thing to do. Everyone was drunk and or high. But the level of drunk and or high that the Shags was is like wild. Like, if you saw these guys in public, you would assume that they've got a really bad fucking problem. You wouldn't think, oh, they're rock stars and they're just doing rock star shit. You would be concerned for them. You would call the cops. And it's for these reasons that the album is just funny. Like, it's just so horribly put together that it's hard not to chuckle. It's hard not to chortle and laugh and giggle. And especially as the album just progressively gets dumber and dumber. I mean, the album ends on a song called We Have a Savior. And it's so sad and droll and pathetic. It sounds like a group of shy kindergartners putting together a little show for the Christmas pageant. Alright, one more and then we're moving into more metal territory, I promise. We have Metallic KO from Iggy Pop and the Stooges, one of the most infamous live albums ever made. First off, I want to say that from like sonically, like from a production, mixing, and mastering standpoint, this might actually be the worst album ever. Like, it is just an absolute mess, recorded on reel-to-reel tape. It's essentially a bootleg that was made into an official live album, and it's filled with so much static and feedback, and everything is grating, and it has this very lo-fi, primitive feel. Everything is quiet despite being very noisy and annoying. You can't really hear much of the music at all consistently as a result of all of this, and what you can hear is sloppy, drunken madness with Iggy Pop fucking up the lyrics and getting shit wrong and being, like, noticeably quite hostile with the audience, and the audience responding, perhaps rightfully so, by throwing eggs and bottles and God knows whatever else at Iggy Pop and the Stooges, and this results in just a continuously aggressive kind of back and forth that just makes this incredibly fascinating to me. Like, this record has so much attitude. It is so hostile. It is so abrasive and so in your face. Iggy Pop is in the audience's face. They are in his face. And it just has this really wild kind of chaotic energy to it as a result. In the essay Iggy Top Blowtorch in Bondage, music journalist and critic Lester Bangs says of Metallic KO, a documentation of the Iggy Holocaust at its most nihilistically out of control. And I mean, yeah, he kind of hit the nail on the head. It's just totally unhinged and wild and totally fascinating and entertaining as a result of that. It might not be funny or fun in the same way that, like, Angelic to the Core or Philosophy of the World is, but, like, goddamn, is it entertaining and enthralling. Alright, moving into more metal territory, let's talk about 6 Feet Under. I know, the Metal Meltdown talking about 6 Feet Under. Fucking shocker, am I right? A lot of my most iconic and most popular videos on this channel have been me talking mad shit about 6 Feet Under and Chris Barnes and his continuously degrading vocal prowess. I have been extremely critical, especially of the last decade of 6 Feet Under's musical output, as well as the antics and you know, kind of social media presence that Chris Barnes just kind of does and has. But credit where it's due, man. Through all of it, I have been consistently entertained. 6 Feet Under, at their worst, are still funny. His voice has just gotten that bad. The songwriting has just gotten that inconsistent. And nowhere is this more prominent, I would say, than on Nightmares of the Decomposed in 2020, which is just filled with these slow, sluggish grooves and these horrible grunting, growling, guttural vocals. Under normal circumstances, calling a death metal album repulsive is awesome. You know, like if I come to you like, oh, the new fucking Tomb Mold is just, oh, it's so fucking gross and or, it's repulsive, man. You know, or Outer Heaven or Maul or 200 Stab Wounds or whoever the fuck, or even like Cannibal Corpse or whatever. Like you hear that and you're like, that's awesome. I want to check that out immediately. When I say that Nightmares the Decompose is repulsive, I mean it. It's fucking gnarly, man. You have to look away. You're gonna vomit otherwise. But it is unintentionally hilarious in its repulsiveness. And so too, might I add, is the entire Graveyard Classics album series. I don't know why Chris Barnes is so dedicated to turning so many like classic rock and heavy metal jams into the worst 6 Feet Under death and roll karaoke slop fest imaginable, but keep it up! It's awesome! I mean, it's terrible, but it's fucking awesome too. I remember there was a rumor for a while that Chris Barnes was working on a Graveyard Classics Volume 5, and supposedly he'd be covering a bunch of Rush stuff on the album. I don't want that to be true, but also I really want it to be true. Like, I would love to hear this motherfucker do the Spirit of Radio and Closer to the Heart. I would love to hear this motherfucker do the entirety of 2112. That's just so fucking dumb and funny. On that note, if Mr. Barnes is watching, I'd say fuck it, just embrace the meme. Do a fucking album of like Broadway songs, you know? Do an album of ballads. Just embrace it. Give it to me. Please, Papa Barnes, I beg of you, bring me the delicious meme fuel. And of course, you know I also have to acknowledge Psycho Sinner, Psychosexual, the brain children of Jeremy Spencer, aka Devil Daddy. This project went through multiple names and phases and iterations over the years, but it was consistently so fucking cringe, so fucking funny. I mean, it was gross and offensive and insulting and repulsive, especially with Torch the Faith, which I think is like nearly 4 years old by now. God damn, I feel old just saying that. And you know, when they made that transition from Psychosexual into Psycho Sinner, when Jeremy spent all that time begging for the internet's forgiveness only to continue dropping horrible, horrible fucking music, when he went out of his way to tell people, oh, Torch the Faith, it was a bad album, I apologize, we're gonna move on, we're gonna make better stuff. And not only did he not make better stuff, but he took that same material and just changed some lyrics and song titles here and there, and then put it on the 9 Psycho Sinner albums, which he all released in one day. It's like, mwah, brilliant. And then a year later, less than a year later, he releases 2 more Psycho Sinner albums, and they're also just as terrible for all the same fucking reasons. Like, what the fuck? And it was always this weird mishmash of, like, kind of edgy goth rock, goth metal, heavy metal, like Five Finger Death Punch, hell yeah, the worst elements of, like, mid-2000s, early 2010s, like Megadeth and, like, Rob Zombie. Weird usage of slurs and weird one-liners and, you know, Devil Daddy talking about, fantasizing about incest and rape and abuse, and, you know, eventually, you know, on some of the later albums he'd whine about cancel culture or whatever the fuck. There was a song where he called people cupcake fucks and he wished they would all jump off bridges, and it was like, what are we doing here, man? This is fucking stupid. And all the time he was dressed as a weird little red latex devil freak, looking like a fucking idiot. It's so funny. I mean, it's gross and it's dumb and it's bad, but hey, I can't sit here and fully hate. I got so many views and subscribers that are talking shit about those records. But they belong in this category. How can I make so many memes and so many jokes about Psychosexual, Psycho Sinner and not mention them here today? God bless you, Devil Daddy, and rest in peace, you weird, freaky little latex fuck. I hope you're burning in hell. Actually, I don't hope you're burning in hell, because you're probably into that for some fucking reason. Next up, we're throwing an OTEP album into the mix, specifically the Godslayer, released last year. This was a cover album she did. I guess I'm grateful that she strayed from being a chronically online Twitter lib and just putting that energy into her albums. But what we got in place of that is, like, equally bad, almost on par with, like, the Graveyard Classics albums from 6 Feet Under. I guess it's worse, though, because at least the Graveyard Classics albums, it's basically just bad death metal karaoke, whereas with this, she's turning, like, these big-name pop, rap, hip-hop, heavy metal songs into, like, these really, like, slow-burning, edgy, kind of overproduced, industrial pop, alt-metal bangers of sorts. Like, there's an Olivia Rodrigo song, there's an Eminem song, there's an old Beach Boys song, there's a fucking Slipknot song. It's just so So fucking weird, none of it makes sense, none of it is well organized, and it's so fucking funny. Like the energy of this album can be summarized as that image of Steve Buscemi being like, "How do you do, my fellow kids?" while he's wearing like the Crow makeup. Okay, so I kind of had to be pulled away while I was recording the video for personal reasons, and that's a shame because there are more albums that I want to talk about. So we're going to do it right now, outside. Why? Because my wife is asleep and I don't want to wake her. Also, it's really warm and humid in there. These are boring details. You don't need to know this. Let's talk more about albums that are so bad that they're good. So let's talk about Chris Holmes. Chris Holmes was the lead guitarist for Wasp for a while. He's been in a couple other smaller hard rock, heavy metal, glam metal bands over the years. Nothing crazy, nothing special. I want to specifically highlight his solo albums, CHP and Shittin' Bricks, released in 2014 and 2015 respectively, because they occupy a kind of funny, weird, terrible on par with that of Dungeon Wolf. Like, just the most incompetent, sloppy, generic, amateur, hard rock, heavy metal imaginable. Terrible riffs, terrible solos, everything has a janky, clumsy, awkward, slow kind of feel to it. It's as if nobody really knows what to do, how to play their instruments, how to, like, make shit sound good. Like, it just sounds like a bunch of guys just kind of jamming and hoping that it maybe works out. Chris Holmes especially, though, on lead vocals is atrocious. I mean, he has this really deep, gruff voice that maybe in theory could work for something really mean and gnarly and gritty, but I don't know, it just kind of sounds like a drunk homeless biker doing really bad karaoke. On that note, let's give a shout out to Dungeon Wolf as well, who are probably the greatest group of metal music trolls to ever walk the face of the earth, and also simultaneous to that, the worst heavy metal band ever, responsible for the worst heavy metal music ever. I firmly believe that Dungeon Wolf are fucking with me and also not fucking with me at the same time. I think they are genuinely making amazing, legendary, revolutionary music, but also they're being deeply insincere and goofy at the same fucking time. Because, like, their music is just so horribly made. Like, the worst production, the worst riffs, the worst guitar solos, the worst vocals, the worst lyrics, the worst everything. The White Elf is an abomination. Metal's Back, an abomination. They continuously claim that they're one of the best metal bands to ever exist, that they're doing something totally brand new and exciting, that another album they did, Slavery or Steel, is like considered to be widely one of the greatest power metal albums ever made. They have all these PR guys working for them behind the scenes because they believe so strongly in the vision of Dungeon Wolf. And they post so many ridiculous comments, and I see in hindsight how a lot of that was made and done to anger folks like me, you know, to create some kind of clout and momentum off of angry reviews. But also, I do firmly think that they firmly think they're still doing something really exciting. I think in some way they are still very serious about what they're doing. They're just also a bunch of fucking delusional fucks also at the same time. It's kind of like how Steel Panther are both a parody of really bad glam metal bands and also themselves just a really bad glam metal band. It's really tempting to just sit here and talk about an endless list of like early 2000s post-grunge and alt metal, you know, like super edgy, stupid, dumb, cringy butt rock, sappy ass ballads and weird, hyper masculine, lame, tough guy shit with watered down fucking groove metal riffs. But, you know, we'd be talking about tons of songs, tons of albums, tons of bands. Instead, I kind of want to zero in and focus on a very specific compilation. It's the official movie soundtrack to the Daredevil movie, like the one with Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner. The Daredevil movie and soundtrack kind of came out at like the perfect time for me as a kid, because this is when I was starting to get really interested in comic books, and also when my mom and my dad were starting to introduce me to like the rock and the pop music that they were listening to, and I was also paying more attention to what my friends were listening to at school. I was paying more attention to what was playing on radio. So for me, this was the perfect combination. I loved the movie, warts and all, and if we're being honest, I still kind of do. It's a fun, nostalgic, dark, edgy ride for me. I love love the soundtrack because it had all the songs from the movie, and the movie was great, so why would the album be bad? And, the soundtrack is even funnier when you have knowledge of the movie, because all of the songs in the movie are used in, like, the most awesome but stupid fucking way imaginable. Like, Bring Me to Life to Evanescence is used specifically during a scene where Elektra is learning how to become like an assassin. Like, she's practicing using those fucking knives and all these sandbags and shit, and meanwhile Daredevil is just kind of like brooding and being stark and quiet and dark and edgy. And like, as you go between like Amy Lee's vocals and the male vocals, I can't remember who did the rap vocals, but you know what I mean, as we're going back and forth between these perspectives, this is also when we're going back and forth between the perspectives in the songs. So when Elektra's on screen, it's Amy Lee, and when Daredevil's on screen, it's the guy rapping. And it's so fucking funny. It's so unintentionally fucking funny. And when I listen to that song on that album, I can't help but think of that fucking scene. And then there's Learn the Hard Way from Nickelback, which is used in this really over-the-top kind of bar fight scene. The Man Without Fear, which is Drowning Pool featuring Rob Zombie, and it has like Bullseye and Daredevil fighting in the streets. And even in the credits you have Won't Back Down from Fuel, which is just like, oh my god. I mean, like, 9-year-old Robert thought it was the most badass fucking thing ever, but I listen to that now and I'm just like, god, they were trying way too fucking hard. They were trying way too hard to make something so big and epic and mean and manly. I love it, man. It's so fucking stupid, but it's so fucking awesome at the same time. And the last name I want to throw into the ring is Eddie and Sin, who I was made aware of by Jay Morris, the Metal Tempest. They got like a kind of a live reaction out of me because I had never before heard of or known much about Eddie and Sin. I remember specifically being introduced to Eddie and Sin via the song Remember Me, which was like a weird mix of like whiny, nasally pop punk post-hardcore with like hip-hop and electronic beats and like metalcore style breakdowns and rhythms and very kind of like mopey, sappy lyrics and shit, like the kind of stuff that you would like scribble into the back of your notebook during like grade 9 algebra. It's like pure early 2010s kind of like MySpace Tumblr core cringe. It's so bad. It's so funny. And every single song that Eddie did was exactly like that. I think he only put out like one major album, Cinna Volume 1, I think it was called. Everything else was mostly singles and like mixtapes, but they all kind of fell into this like category of just whiny, over-the-top, dramatic, lame as fuck, like electronic-core, metalcore, post-hardcore dribble. And he was trying so hard to sell this like super tough guy image, like throwing slurs around, talking about how crazy he was, how wild he was, and it was just so fucking cringe, so fucking funny. I have no idea where Eddie and Sin is now. I imagine that Eddie and Sin is like an adult. I imagine that like he's probably looking at a lot of that material, looking back at it now and going, what the fuck was I thinking? And I don't blame him. I would do the same thing. But I mean, it's wild. Bless you, Eddie and Sin, for giving that. And if you're still making music, fucking let me know, man, because that shit was funny. I mean, maybe you're making good shit now. I don't know. I hope you're making good shit now. But if it still sounds like that, let me know. I will unironically, I will do for that shit what like movie nerds back in the 2000s did for the aforementioned The Room. Like, it's so fucking funny, so fucking good, so terrible, but in all the best ways. I had not expected to film this final portion outside in these conditions, but you know what? I kind of liked it. It's kind of fun, kind of freeing in a way to get out of my little stuffy apartment. Let me know what albums you think are so bad that they're genuinely fun and entertaining. Let me know what albums you think are so bad that they're good. Join us on Discord. Comments below, please and thank you. Subscribe, other videos, and as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.